Welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, because we've got an absolutely wild topic today. For decades, the whole idea of unidentified flying objects has been, shrouded in secrecy, whispered about on the internet, and just fiercely debated. But on May 8th, 2026, the entire landscape shifted completely. Out of nowhere, the U.S. Department of War released a massive, unprecedented declassification of UFO files, suddenly thrusting all these top-secret military encounters right into the public spotlight. So today, we're going to break down exactly what's inside these files, map out the data, and separate Hollywood science fiction from some very real, very shocking geopolitical realities.
Are these truly visitors from another world, or is there a terrestrial pattern hiding in plain sight? To kick things off, I want you to picture this gripping encounter from 2023. Imagine you're at an undisclosed location in America. Two highly trained federal agents are on a routine evening operation. Suddenly, they spot a round, glowing orange orb just hovering in the sky. It vanishes. But then, over the next 2 days, two totally separate teams of federal officers witness the exact same thing. And guys, it gets wilder. These sworn agents watched as smaller red orbs launched from the main orange object, almost like a mothership deploying tiny fighter planes. And this happened 5 distinct times. We aren't talking about anonymous internet rumors here. These are trained federal officers providing sworn statements to the U.S. government.
But hey, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just make sure we're on the same page about what we actually mean by these terms. A UFO is simply an unidentified flying object. That's the whole shebang. It's just an aerial phenomenon that the observer can't immediately identify or explain. Now, what's really fascinating here is the massive disconnect between the military definition and the cultural one. When most of us hear UFO, we immediately jump to, oh, extraterrestrial aliens, right? But for the military and aviation experts, a UFO is literally just a giant question mark in the sky. It's a potential safety hazard or a security threat. It doesn't automatically mean we've got visitors from Alpha Centauri.
Section 1. The new UFO files, declassified data.
162. That is the exact number of classified files the U.S. Department of War dumped on the public in 2026. Hosted on a brand new webpage, war.gov/UFO, these aren't just your standard, heavily redacted, boring text documents. No. This massive release includes Pentagon reports, FBI documents, NASA transcripts, State Department cables, and most incredibly, 28 previously unseen videos and 14 images. We are looking at an absolute treasure trove of raw data that the general public was literally never meant to see. Let's actually look at some of the most staggering modern cases from these 162 files. We already talked about that mind-blowing orange orb incident from 2023, but check out these other ones. Also in 2023, over the ocean in Greece, the U.S. military captured an infrared video of an object executing a 90-degree turn while traveling at 80 miles per hour. Let's be real. Basic physics and inertia tell us that no known human aircraft or drone can withstand those forces without being ripped to shreds. It is truly astonishing. Then in 2024, high-speed, semi-transparent objects just vanished completely in front of highly sophisticated surveillance systems in Iraq and Syria. And going back a bit to 2013, the FBI seriously investigated credible eyewitness reports of a massive 195-foot-long metallic ellipsoid, basically a giant oval-shaped craft surrounded by bright light, that vanished into thin air.
Moving on to Section 2. Sightings beyond Earth. UFOs in space.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high. Now that quote is legendary. Back in 1965, the United States launched the Gemini 7 spaceflight. Just 4.5 hours into the mission, astronaut Frank Borman radioed Houston with those exact words. Now, think about this. In military terminology, a bogey means an unidentified, potentially hostile aircraft or missile. It's a word fighter pilots use in war zones down here on Earth. So it makes absolutely no sense to use that term in the empty, lifeless vacuum of space. Ground control thought, okay, he's just looking at his own rocket booster, but Borman confirmed the booster was in a completely different location. He was genuinely looking at a distinct, unidentified third object orbiting the Earth.
And the mysteries only deepened during the legendary moon missions. During Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin reported seeing strange flashing lights in the cabin and a massive, sparkling laser-like light source right on the moon's surface. Think about how bizarre that would be in 1969. Then, Apollo 12 astronauts witnessed inexplicable flashes and particles rising from their landing site. And perhaps most astonishingly of all, during Apollo 17 in 1972, a photograph captured 3 distinct dots hovering in a perfect triangular formation above the lunar surface. For decades, everyone just dismissed it as a camera glitch, but the new preliminary analysis from the government, they say these could actually be physical objects. Just let that sink in for a second.
Section 3. The Flying Saucer Panic. How it all began.
To understand where we are, we have to look back. Everything really changed in June 1947, when a pilot named Kenneth Arnold saw 9 shining objects over Mount Rainier moving at impossible speeds. He famously described their motion as skipping like a saucer across water. Well, the media misunderstood him, and boom, the term flying saucer was born. The idea spread like wildfire. Just weeks later, in July, debris crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. Get this. The U.S. Army literally issued a press release claiming they recovered a flying disc, only to make a frantic, embarrassing U-turn the very next day, claiming, "Oh wait, it was just a weather balloon." By 1952, the panic reached an absolute fever pitch when glowing objects swarmed Washington, D.C., visually confirmed and registered on radar. This sheer volume of sightings forced the government to create Project Blue Book just to investigate it all.
Over 17 years, Project Blue Book investigated over 12,000 UFO claims. The vast majority were easily explained. Misidentified stars, planets, commercial airplanes, or conventional weather balloons. But here is the number that really matters: 701. Out of all those investigations, 701 cases remained entirely unidentified. We're talking about cases involving multiple credible witnesses, radar data, and physical evidence that simply defied any conventional explanation. And it's this number that left a lingering shadow of doubt that has persisted for decades.
Section 4. The Hidden Military Pattern. Geopolitical Realities.
Okay, here's where things get really fascinating. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. When we plot all of this out, a brilliant macro-level pattern emerges. During the 1950s and 60s, the vast majority of UFO sightings were concentrated in the US, Germany, and along the Soviet border. Notice anything? Those are the absolute hotspots of Cold War military activity. Fast forward to the 2020s, and the new hotspots are Iraq, Syria, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Indo-Pacific near Japan. What do all these modern locations have in common? They are the exact areas with the most advanced, dense U.S. military presence and surveillance on the entire planet. These UFOs aren't just appearing randomly. They are showing up precisely where the U.S. military is looking the hardest.
Which leads us to a very logical, if kind of funny question. In Hollywood movies, the aliens always seem to attack New York or park their ship on the White House lawn. But in reality, looking at the hard data, we really have to ask, why do aliens always visit U.S. military bases? Why aren't they so obsessed with American nuclear silos and carrier strike groups? Well, the answer, of course, is that they probably aren't aliens at all.
Section 5. The Real Explanations. Behind the Smokescreen.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that the UFO phenomenon largely breaks down into 2 very earthly categories. On one hand, we have U.S. advanced spy tech. In 1994, it was finally declassified that the famous Roswell crash wasn't an alien ship at all. It was a top-secret Project Mogul balloon used to spy on Soviet nuclear tests. And those alien bodies people reported seeing? The military later admitted they were dropping anthropomorphic test dummies from high altitudes. The government basically let the alien myth flourish to mask their own classified testing. On the other hand, we have foreign enemy surveillance. In modern hotspots like the Middle East or the Indo-Pacific, these so-called UFOs are often highly advanced Chinese high-altitude spy balloons, mothership drones, or Iranian surveillance assets probing American defenses.
But wait, what about those incredible space sightings? Well, as it turns out, the astronauts themselves eventually provided some very grounded scientific explanations. Neil Armstrong actually suggested that the strange cabin flashes were likely just sunlight leaking through window covers, or atomic particles interacting with the spacecraft's shielding. And Buzz Aldrin? He concluded that the massive laser he saw was actually just the sun's reflection bouncing perfectly off a smooth, glass-like lake back down on Earth. Space is completely filled with bizarre radiation and natural phenomena that can easily trick the human eye.
Bringing it all together, the U.S. Defense Department recently established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, to investigate all of this definitively. And in their sweeping February 2024 report, their conclusion was incredibly blunt. They stated there is zero evidence that the U.S. government possesses extraterrestrial technology and zero evidence of any alien reverse engineering programs. The vast majority of these objects, they concluded, are simply ordinary drones, weather balloons, rockets, or natural celestial bodies. Now, this brings us to a final, very interesting piece of analysis from our source material regarding why these 162 files were suddenly dumped on the public right now, especially without any helpful context. The former chief of AARO argued that releasing raw, unexplained videos like this just fuels harmful pseudoscience. According to the analytical viewpoint presented in our sources, this specific document dump was a proposed political distraction tactic by the Trump administration. It's alleged that releasing these sensational UFO files was an attempt to bury news of political failures and a calculated effort to divert public attention away from other major controversies, like the Epstein files. This perspective really highlights how the UFO narrative can theoretically be utilized as a tool for public misdirection.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today. This quote perfectly summarizes everything we've learned. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Mystery thrives where transparency is absent. While it's incredibly fun to dream about visitors from the stars, the reality of secret military tech, foreign espionage, and political misdirection is, honestly, arguably just as fascinating. The next time you see a blurry video of a glowing orb online, look for the terrestrial pattern hiding right in plain sight. It really makes you wonder, what other modern mysteries are just geopolitical smokescreens waiting to be uncovered? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the skies and the facts.